welcome to the stage, Hope Chopik Schneider.
Good morning. So, this is a very strange moment in my life because I'm being asked to reflect on something that happened 43 years ago. I was looking around at you when you were arriving and I realized, oh my God, most of you weren't even born 43 years ago, and that's kind of an interesting comment. This is a very poignant moment for me because we didn't think about legacy back in 1980, 81, 84. We just thought about getting stuff done. And I know that I carry the mantle of legacy, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. But I have to start my remarks today with an acknowledgement to Bob Fitzpatrick, who's no longer with us. And he was the visionary of the Olympic Arts Festival. And in my mind, I've had many wonderful conversations with him over the past 2 weeks because the question that was posed to me was, okay, so where were you when you started planning the games? Or the festival? When did you know you were planning the festival? What was your process of envisioning? How did it go? And I realized that it was something I'd never really thought about. You know, when did we decide to do the festival the way we did it? What was our process of envisioning? What were the things we took into account as we were thinking about what we wanted to do? And I started full-time with the LAOC October 1st, 1981, which is essentially about 1,000 days before the opening ceremonies of the Games. Did I know on that first day, and I had been a consultant starting probably in June prior to that, and I think Bob probably started in January prior to that. And I think during that period, we did what any good planner would do, is we were looking at the context that we were going to be planning in. And we were looking at what previous Olympic Games had done and what cultural components had worked, what hadn't worked. And then I think once I got into the LAOC, I spent a lot of time thinking about what was the internal context that I was working in, because the LAOC was a very interesting organization with a set of really interesting challenges. It was not, you know, all the people that worked there were entrepreneurs, they were lawyers, they were accountants, they were athletes, they were retired athletes. And Bob and I were sort of the strange fish in this crew. We were from the not-for-profit arts world, and we were actually the only people on staff early on who knew anything about producing live events. So they relied on us for expertise in a wonderful array of things. But I realized that if I asked Bob, you know, Bob, when did we decide to do an international arts festival as the cultural component for the 1984 Games? He would have said, the day they hired me. And I think that's probably true, but I think that there are other factors that really informed what we did and how we did it. And here is what you need to know. When I started working for the Olympics, it was a failed concept. No one had any expectations that there was even an opportunity for them. Montreal had mounted debt that took them 3 decades to pay off. We boycotted the Moscow Olympics, and the biggest cultural component in the United States prior to ours was in Lake Placid, and they put on a festival and didn't pay their artists. So for the arts community to think that there was an opportunity for them, I think it was very remote, which provided us with an opportunity to do a lot of planning prior to people asking what was their opportunity in the Games. It was a privately financed Games, and that's really important to understand. If I turned to the city would say, there's no money here for you. If I turned to the county, there was no money there for me. At the state level, that was true, and at the federal level. So we knew that our budget was going to be privately financed, and the financing of the games was the strategy for financing us, which is we had a corporate sponsor, and so we had to come up with a plan that would secure $10 million, which is great. I mean, it's a great way to fundraise. One ask, one big gift. But it meant that we had to come up with something that was on brand with all of the sponsor opportunities that were on offer from the LAOOC. And on brand in 1980, 81 meant we had to do something extraordinary, we had to do something international, and we had to do something that the corporate sponsor would be proud to be part of. It was controversial slightly that we decided that we would do an international festival rather than a national festival. The Olympic Charter says, you know, you need to do a cultural component that's of equal stature to the Games. And Bob and I faced the conundrum of how do you do equal stature and have one thing be international and the other thing be national? So we thought that the opportunity that was afforded by the Olympics was to bring the best artists in the world to Los Angeles and literally knock the socks off the arts community and the arts audience. When I was writing the first plan for the Olympic Arts Festival, I held in mind what were the great concerns of the LAOOC. First concern, money. Where's the money? How do we get the money? How do we secure the money? How do we have the loyalty of our donors and our sponsors and they feel proud of what we do? The second major concern for the LAOOC because of terrorism at Munich was terrorism in Los Angeles. I lived in a post-9/11 world in 1980. We were all trained in security. We all had security as a top concern as we were thinking about what we were doing. There was a prohibition from congregation. I couldn't think about a festival that was an open field. I had to think about ticketed events. I did. Once we had to start thinking about ticketed events, we had to think about what would the audience want to see because we had to be successful at selling our tickets. And Bob was the person who said, we're just going to go brave, we're going to go wild, and we're going to bring contemporary artists to Los Angeles that are informing artistic practice around the world. And that became determinative in what we did. People ask me, you know, relatively, are we late as we look towards 28? And my answer is, I don't think so. I mean, we did what we did in 1,000 days. That's 3 years. We still have 4 years, and we can think about a lot of things. But one of the things that I do know is that envisioning at a certain point turns to strategy. And one of the things I learned working at the Olympics is I love opening ceremonies because in opening ceremonies, everybody is an Olympian. At closing ceremonies, there are winners and there are losers. And I think about that, which is envisioning is about unbounded opportunity, strategy is about doing and getting it done. And with that, I'm going to introduce my colleagues who are going to be talking about how they're thinking about the opportunity of these games and the cultural component. And I want to make sure I do not mess up my introductions. They are the ones who are going to really be thinking about how they can extend the opportunity to you and how to listen about how you extend the opportunity to them. Joining me on stage is Kristen Sakota, Director of the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture. Daniel Tarica, General Manager of the LA City Department of Cultural Affairs. and Nora Halpern, advisor to the Cultural Olympiad at the LA 28. So, in contrast, we are about 1,365 days from the opening ceremonies. Luckily, I am no longer counting down the days. I turn to my colleagues to tell us about this moment of time from their perspective, beginning with Nora, then Daniel, and then Kristen. Okay.
Take it away.
What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I think that dancing backstage before a panel is really the way to go. So I want to thank the band because we were really enjoying it back there. It's a pleasure to be here, and I know that there were a number of questions that you had sent us in advance, Hope.
I did.
And so I'm sort of just going to run through them. I love the concept, and we're working within the concept of an Olympiad that's equal to the excellence of all of the athletes that are coming for the Olympics and Paralympics. And one of the things that I always make a point of is to talk about the pair of games. So it's really the Summer of Games. This will be the first time that Los Angeles is hosting the Paralympic Games. And so they are as elite as the Olympians, the Paralympians, and so we are considering both games and the bridge in between as a really perfect opportunity to not only uplift culture, but also to make people aware of the excellence in all people. And so key to it really is excellence. I guess one of your questions was how do we view 2028 and who's at the center of decision making? And for us, and I should say us, we are at the moment a powerful group of two. And so I send regards from the chair, Maria Bell, who had a conflict in another city. Otherwise, she would be representing here today as well. But for us, the people that we're really answering to is the Los Angeles community. So for us, whereas, and I should say in terms of legacy, your legacy in '84 was very impactful for me as a young person in LA. I loved the Arts Festival in '84. I am one of the people old enough in the room to have gone to see Pina Bausch perform for the first time, and I can still smell the autumn leaves flying off the stage as they were kicked up.
Think about the boldness of bringing a ballet company that did a Rite of Spring that was downright bestial and dirty.
It was fabulous. And as a young curator, it really changed my mind about what dance was, what performance was. So I had a lot of moments of epiphany during the '84 Cultural Olympiad and the festivals that followed in Los Angeles, and it is those kinds of epiphanies that we also want to create for the audience in 2028, and while we are focused on an international audience coming into LA, for us, it really is about Los Angeles and the celebration of Los Angeles, the celebration of LA as a creative city, as a city of great artists, of great culture, of great history, and shining a light on that for the world. So it's a little bit in counter to the notion of bringing the world to LA. We feel the world exists in every community in LA, and there's so much, thank you. There's so much hidden in plain sight. As someone, I went to LA USD, I went to a public high school in West LA, and Uni High, if anyone is out there. I remember as a high schooler being sort of emotionally drawn to the southeastern campus of the school, not really realizing why, but getting towards it was a very sloppily, with caution taped, cordoned off area that was forbidden without explanation. And it wasn't until maybe 8 years later that I learned that that site is one of the most sacred Tongva sites in Los Angeles. Now, weird that at a school they wouldn't teach you that. So one of the things that we're really committed to is helping Los Angelinos realize their own history, realize their own importance in their neighborhoods. So for us, it's been wonderful to be part of these community listening sessions, to really get deep down onto the community level, to hear what people do want to see and what they want to hear and what they want to participate in during the Olympiad. So that's really what our focus is at the moment. We're honing down our strategic plan, which we hope to have finished in the next several weeks. And there'll probably be an opportunity for more of these conversations to hone in once we have figured out exactly the budget, the needs, and the pushes going forward. But in the meantime, it's really about hearing from all of you that I can't see out there about what you want to see in LA in 2028.
So before going to Daniel, just a quick follow-up question. So in writing your strategic plan, for me, when I did planning, I planned first for Peter Ueberroth and Harry Usher and obviously Bob. And actually, they were the deciders. In your case, who are the deciders?
Well, I would say first and foremost the community. Secondly, LA 28 will have to sort of buy into the vision that we have, and then working with partners. But Maria is someone who's spent many, many years in the arts as a philanthropist in Los Angeles. I've spent many, many years as a worker and participant in the arts community in Los Angeles, as an advocate in Los Angeles. So, so we feel pretty confident that, you know, from sort of a grassroots up and a grass top down, we'll come to some consensus.
Great. Thank you. Daniel.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. And thank you to Nora. Thank you to Hope for this. And thank you to Arts for LA. We really appreciate you for bringing us all together for this conversation and for your ongoing advocacy. And lastly, just thank you to all of you for being here today, because your investment in Los Angeles and the arts and cultural sector is here, and this is what is so important and for us to be talking about today. So as Nora talked about a little bit, as we think about what the cultural program and cultural plan might look like, it's an opportunity for us to think about ourselves as a city, as a region, as a state, and as a nation, to really showcase who we are as a city, who we are as a region, with our innovation and creativity and our talent here, and thinking about our communities and our neighborhoods. As we think about, kind of on a very broad level, about some of the areas that we are wanting and thinking about activating, we're thinking about festivals and murals and public art, thinking about education and arts and with youth, and thinking about this through a series of events and programs and initiatives. As we think about the time period that we're in. So we're thinking about this very much in a series of between now and the games, during the games and the immediate time preceding, and then what ultimately will it look like for us as a legacy, and continue on and carrying on the theme that we're navigating through today. As Hope shared a little bit, our city is a very different city than we were in 1984. And as we think about this, we really think about this as a series of partnerships. This is something that all of us are going to do together, and that we're going to do with all of you. And we're going to be deeply in partnership and in reliant on our artists, our culture bearers, our arts and cultural organizations, and our neighborhood-based organizations. And for us, as the host city, as we think about our coordination with LA 28, we think about how we're going to operationalize equity and inclusion, and thinking about outreach to our local artists, to our cultural producers, and our vendors, as we think about what is the experience that we want to create in our neighborhoods and cultural experiences in conjunction with the 2028 Games Cultural Program. So one of the areas that has continued to kind of come into focus with the city is the mayor's theme, Games for All, and thinking about how our cultural program, as we are thinking about this, will very much be focused on activations across the city. And you know, we had an opportunity to see some of what these look like in Paris as the festival sites. So seeing how there are opportunities for folks to be able to go and experience the games, be able to watch those events, and also to see those sites activated. So to see arts and culture in those sites, and thinking about what does that look like here in Los Angeles, and how do we do that in addition to thinking about the games and the venue sites. And also, as was mentioned earlier, thinking about the transportation corridors and recreation and parks facilities and our arts and cultural centers. And the other piece of that, I think, really speaks to access. And how do we make sure that folks have access? And then on top of that, how do we ensure that that access actually turns to participation? So as we're thinking about our immediate future, we're following and thinking and working similarly, as Nora talked about engaging and planning and developing as we hear from our communities. So we're partnering and participating with the county on their cultural convenings, and thinking about what is the information that we're gathering and how we're going to be able to take that combined and leveraging with the great work that we're already doing. And thinking about, from our department side, thinking about our arts and cultural centers, our theaters, thinking about our grants partners, and then even thinking much more broadly about how we're working with all of you and our arts and cultural sector as a whole. We are continuing to look at different ways to deepen our investment, thinking about the impact that we've been able to have through the South LA Culture Initiative, and thinking about telling the stories and who are the stories and who are our cultural treasures, thinking about our indigenous populations and how we're going to be able to lift those up and be able to recognize that and use this as a real opportunity. I think I'd also like to just touch on the international partnerships that we've been able to start building. And we had the opportunity to work with Paris on the Cultural Olympiad, thinking and building opportunities for artists. So we as a city were able to involve about 50 artists here in Los Angeles, as well as some artists that were able to tell the story internationally. So thinking about how we build those international bridges. And then I think all of this continues to, as much as we think about the games, we're also thinking about the exciting times that we have coming forward with the FIFA World Cup and thinking about test events and proof of concept opportunities that we're going to have. Lastly, I just want to talk briefly about, as we think about also the Paralympic Games. This is the first time that the city is going to be hosting the Paralympic Games, and we're so very excited about that. And what opportunities does that present for our disability arts community, thinking about the time in between the Olympics and Paralympics and how we're going to be able to activate that time period as well, and really grow that and use arts and culture in that way. And I think the last thing that I will touch on is thinking about who is it that we're doing this for, following up on the question, and thinking a lot about how we're doing this, centering our city's residents. But our city's residents also include our artists, our arts organizations, and our arts and cultural sector in our community. And thinking both of how we are doing this as both, in a sense, consumers of what it is that we're going to be building, and also as activators. Because ultimately, each of us is going to be ambassadors, or each of us will be an ambassador, both for each other with our regional interactions, as well as thinking about the international visitors that are going to be able to come. So I'll stop there, but I want to say thank you again for this opportunity. This is really exciting.
Thank you, Daniel. And Kristen, how are you framing this moment?
Well, thank you, Hope, and everybody. It's great to be on this panel, and thank you to Arts for LA. It's great to be with everybody. So you'll hear, I think, some good alignment here in the sense that I think there is some consensus, that might be too strong of a word, but some consensus that 40 years out from 1984, that there is a real sense of an exciting opportunity to showcase and uplift the incredible, rich culture, arts, entertainment, and opportunities that are here in Los Angeles County. Yes.
Agreed.
And so the idea of having our arts and culture really in conversation on a global stage, it's exciting. And there's so many dimensions to this. I mean, I think we're all really living and working in an era where Los Angeles is already being recognized as a creative capital, recognized as a place for art, with a capital A, and like not just Hollywood, which, you know, back in the day when I was in college, you know, in California, it was sort of like, oh, don't go to LA, oh, everybody's very shallow, it's only about Hollywood if you're not in the business. And so all of that kind of thinking at how it's really being recognized so much more, in addition to recognition of the deep cultural legacies, cultural heritage, cultural history. So I'm very excited about how that rich diversity, one of our greatest assets, can shine through the lens of arts, culture, and creativity, and really be both on display and in conversation with our communities and our world, and really also opportunities with our nation as well. So with that, focus is certainly on Los Angeles County for us as the primary focus, but understanding that there are relationships and collaborations to be made Within Los Angeles County, as I'm sure many of you know, there are, in addition to Los Angeles City as our largest city and as the holder of the bid for the games, there also are 88 cities total in Los Angeles County. There are over 100 what are called unincorporated areas. So this is my jurisdiction where the Department of Arts and Culture, our work is to advance arts, culture, and creativity throughout the entire county. But we also know there will, of course, be interplay with others in the Southern California region. I think there are opportunities to think about the state and, of course, nationally and internationally as well. So that's certainly, I think, the first piece of your questions. Definitely from where I sit in terms of Los Angeles County, I know that, like we talked about, just briefly touched on, so City of LA holds the official bid, right, and holds the contract, the games agreement with LA28. LA28 is an independent nonprofit entity created to deliver, and I'm sorry I'm speaking for you, but I just want to make sure folks have this kind of lay of the land, to deliver the games and to deliver a cultural component of the games. And so in that, if we are truly going to have regional access, if we are going to have a regional cultural component, if we're going to have coordination, if we're going to have collaboration, we know that that means it will take all of us to be in this work. And so LA County, I think, really has an opportunity to play a key role in helping to build coordination because we convene many of these tables already and because our actual jurisdiction is the entire county. And so building these relationships and partnerships is something that we're really already beginning and doing, and we're going to build on those networks as we do it. I also want to highlight that I'm really excited about the notion of the artistic and cultural impact and cultural legacy. And thinking about what has come before in '84, I mean, there are arts organizations that didn't even exist back then, right? So it was incredible, as I have heard, for opera, for example. Just take that as an example. There was no organization called LA Opera. Now there is, right? And so thinking about all the different, like, how does that set us up differently to have combinations? We just have the incredible Rite of Spring, actually, coming, right, with the African Company, and just phenomenal, phenomenal work is both being created here, presented here, and traveling here on our stages, in our museums, in our communities. And so I think it's a really exciting opportunity, but it is really different than 40 years ago. So I'm really excited about the artistic and cultural impact that our artists and our organizations can make, but I'm also really excited about what we at LA County Arts and Culture, in our vision statement, our vision is essentially about arts, culture, and creativity being integral to civic life for all of our people and communities. And why am I breaking that down? Because I see that as three main things. We're always carrying the flag for arts and culture, of course. That is our main mission, our goal. It also means that we are always focused on our partners, which are our artists and culture organizations, because it's really through you that we deliver all of the benefits in kind of public policy speak of quality of life, a great economy, better outcomes in terms of health and well-being for our communities, phenomenal joy, education for young people, all of that. We don't do it directly. We're more akin to a funder, right? So we do that through funding you, through supporting you, through providing resources for you, and through other initiatives and programs that we organize. And so I'm very excited about how our field over the last 10 to 20 years, and I think the Cultural Olympiads have started to move in this direction a bit too at times, is having increased recognition in our work and a better ability perhaps to more widely express all of these benefits of the arts. So things that we've known since time immemorial, but we're now stronger. We have data to support it, and those of us sitting in these seats around sort of public policy especially talk about the benefits for arts and education and how kids who are exposed to arts stay in school longer. Talk about social impact of the arts and how having more cultural resources and programs in an artist in your community means better outcomes in things like public safety, educational attainment, and health and well-being, not only for those participating, absolutely, but even just those by being in your community. So think about the power of that. Even if you didn't go to the performances, you didn't go to the museum, your entire community is better off. So I'm excited because we've been developing so many of these cross-sector arts initiatives ourselves. We see it in the field, we know it's happening in our communities, and we know there are other partners there. To think about also how do we, as culture, want to show up in both artistic legacy in creating a stronger infrastructure for ourselves, but also in leaving Los Angeles better off and supporting the broader legacy of the games, which are things like engaging youth, engaging in education and engagement, access, of course, but also things like inclusion, cultural inclusion, racial inclusion, gender parity, and yes, absolutely, disability inclusion, especially with the Paralympic Games, but not limited to the Paralympic Games. We have an unparalleled opportunity to lift that up through the arts. Disability, artistry, inclusion, access, and more. And the broader Games is looking at transit mobility and things like environmental and climate sustainability. And of course, economic opportunity. So it's also, for me, there's kind of this bigger remit. I think for a lot of us who are thinking about this, and we've kind of started to see this, I think, in some of our colleagues around the world who have had the Games, who sit in these kind of seats over the last 10, 20 years or so, is they're really explicitly thinking about not only sort of the cultural frame and who will be the audiences and will it be amazing on the stages, but really how also will culture help us create a stronger legacy in these other arenas or these other broader goals. So I'm really excited about that. I think the power and the opportunity is there, but it is going to take a lot of coordination and thinking and sort of like taking all of that and now really laying it out into a stronger strategy that builds on the time we have now and the time of the excitement and sort of the height of what might be the cultural Olympiad activity and then leaving the legacy after.
I can see that Nora wants to
Nora's
respond,
excited.
and I want to respond too, because I also want to key off of a comment that Gustavo made, which is about, for me, I was very focused on the Olympic Arts Festival, but I was also the full-time cultural person at the LAOOC, which meant that I sat at the table for organizing the opening and closing ceremonies and how I could integrate the arts community into that. I was the person who, every time we did a big damn LAOOC dinner, it was, well, what are we going to do for culture and entertainment? And I'd have to go into the Rolodex of the artists that would be appropriate for that thing. The VIPs that came into town, what part of town did they see? Who do I introduce them to, et cetera? Not to mention that we did programming for both of the athletic villages. That was a whole festival, private festival in and of itself. And the people here, knowing about you and the access to the incredible cultural resources that are here, helps them do their jobs throughout the next 4 years. And the final thing is we employed over 1,000 people just on the Olympic Arts Festival.
So, so I really just want to echo what my colleagues on stage have said. We have very synergistic feelings about what the organization and the opportunity of 2028 can bring. One thing that is different is that the LA28, although supportive of having an Olympiad, is not funding the Cultural Olympiad. So we're needing to establish our own kind of standalone 501c3 situation. So if there is a Times Mirror of 2028 out there who wants to be the key sponsor, that's challenging. But so that's something to keep in mind as I'm sitting on stage with funders. But I also want to say that for us, culture and the arts is much broader than just the arts with a capital A. So we're focusing on food, we're focusing on fashion, we're focusing on film, we're focusing on crafts. So it's really going to be broad. And it's an opportunity for every aspect of what makes LA so marvelous to shine.
Right, right. I think it's an unparalleled opportunity that you all face with the number of major sort of focusing athletic events that are happening, because it gives you time to do tests of concept, if you will, and experiment and see what works. I also want to bring a sensitivity to the audience about planning and timelines. I mean, at 1,000 days before the Games, I was really in the mode of how do we do this, how do we do this, how do we do this, how do we do this? And I had a single project that was going to be done. It was going to open on June 1st. It was going to close on whatever day we closed. I think August. We closed right before the game started. But that was 930 days of planning and 70 days of implementation. It's a very different timeline than what Kristen and Daniel are facing because they have reiterative annual planning cycles. And so there is going to be a different kind of sense and pace to their timing and to their interaction. And Nora has the huge challenge of planning and raising funds at the same time, which makes planning very difficult. It does. Anything you want to add? It's been tremendously interesting to me, and I wish you all luck.
You're looking for work? No, I'm just kidding.
All good wishes.
That's what I would add. You want to come up?
So one of the other areas that I think I keep thinking about, and this keeps coming up in conversations, is communication.
Yes.
And
yes.
Thinking about, seeing how things were presented in Paris, thinking about how do we do this here? How do we build an infrastructure right now that will start highlighting the amazing arts and cultural infrastructure, our artists, our arts institutions, our cultural bearers, our cultural institutions. How do we do that? And thinking about how we take this advantage of this opportunity to really build on this so that we have something that goes to the games, but is really a through line through the games and really goes through, so we have that in perpetuity. So that's another area that we're thinking about.
I think that, if I had any one major concern, I worked in an environment where there was no internet. There were no computers, and there was no cell phone. And the channels of communication to the broader public was a brochure and the Los Angeles Times. And so there was in fact a greater ease and focus. There was infinitely less noise. There was no social media. And I must say, I think the communications challenge and the focusing challenge is almost overwhelming. I do.
Well, we welcome the noise, actually, because we feel that that's the way that we'll find the best road forward to 2028. And I'll also say that while we are doing external listening sessions, one of the things that Maria and I were both insistent upon was meeting with every internal, proactively meeting with every internal LA28 department. So we've met with transportation to think through legacy projects that relate to the hubs. I think it was the supervisor mentioned the word culture hubs. That's exactly what we're thinking about for the transit hubs. So we've spoken to hospitality. We've spoken to the security system. We want people bumping into culture wherever they go. And if we bring people from sports into the arts, with an understanding that, oh wait, I do participate in the arts. It's not an other. To me, that is another win, to bring a whole new community of understanding to the value of the arts and the power of the arts in Los Angeles.
Did you?
Oh, I was only going to add a parallel, which is just to say that similarly, I think for each of us within kind of the entities that we operate in. So for LA County has organized its departments into work groups around the Olympic and Paralympic Games and the World Cups, actually. And so I've definitely been presenting and making sure to be carrying the flag for arts and culture in those greater conversations and been asked to speak on various panels. We've also had conversations with Metro, which of course, as a transportation agency, is sitting in a lot of these conversations and has some initial thoughts and plans about intersections of the arts. I wholeheartedly agree the marketing communication is huge. It also goes hand in hand with wayfinding, goes hand in hand with, I think a lot of the strategies, you talked about timeline. I think a lot of the strategies will continue to get refined and nuanced as we go forward, because even just the question of kind of the game's behavior, will folks go really to culture and then when the games begin, primarily turn to the games, or will there be folks who are like, I'm not going to the games, but I'm so excited that right near me is an entire, activity or festival or great exhibit, and I'm going to do that. So how we kind of manage that and think about that over time, I think will continue to shift, but there are a lot of learnings. We are convening the field to hear from the field, LA County Department of Arts and Culture, in collaboration with these folks, to hear more from folks about what they think the opportunities are, what they think the needs are, and to build more dialogue amongst the field, because we also know we are not going to do it all, literally. There will be other folks, and there will be themes and things for folks to collaborate on with one another. So it's exciting. I just wanted to kind of mention that each of us, I think, has a kind of a setup, whether it's city, county, where there may be board we've had motions from the supervisors directing us to look at arts, culture, and recreational opportunities in the World Cups and the Olympic Paralympic Games. We've got different strategies that we're setting up internally as well as externally.
Well, the thing that's sort of most exciting to me is there are so many differing avenues to participate, to engage, and to extend your talents and how you perceive your opportunities. And that's so exciting because we were a very closed shop. We were. And we were the only game in town. And that's a different thing. And it accomplished what it could accomplish given the givens. But there's just such a wealth. There's now such a wealth. It's so wonderful. Anything else? I'm so sorry. We could actually go on talking all day because we have talked a lot amongst ourselves, and the fruitfulness is in the conversation and the creativity is in the conversation. And I thank you for providing us with the opportunity to have this conversation be slightly more public. Thank you.